for today. Thank you for all your many blessings. Thank you for waking us up this morning, getting us through another day. Lord, we just invite you in. We ask you to take over, for you to guide this, and for you to help us receive in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, let's talk about addiction. It's the only disease that will not go untreated. All right? You're going to treat it with drugs and alcohol. You're going to treat it with a recovery program, or you're going to treat it with suicide. But it's not going to go untreated. All right? So if you are a drug addict or an alcoholic, one of these three things is going on. You're either in recovery, working a program, you're getting high, or you're on the way to doing one of them, or you're going to kill your freaking self. All right? But it's not going to go untreated. It is progressive, which means it will only get worse. It is chronic, which means it's not going away. And it is fatal, which means it will kill if not treated. All right? The other thing is, it's the only disease where the only one who can treat it is the one who has it. All right? So, if you have this thing, the only person that can treat yours is you. Nobody else can treat it for you. All right? If you got it, it's not going away. You got it, you got it. It's going to get worse over time, and if you don't learn to treat it, it's going to kill you. Okay? So this is what we're dealing with. Now, how do you know if you're an alcoholic or an addict? Well, we know that there's three types. We have the casual user. This is the person that drinks drugs. They can put it down, no problem. The second kind is, and I'll write these two, three kinds of users. One, casual. Two, hardcore. This is the person that drinks everybody under the table. They're at the kegger. They got the funnel in their mouth. They're partying until everybody's out. Get DUIs, maybe lose a marriage, go to jail a couple times, but eventually something kicks in and they have a reality check and they say, I need to stop or I'm going to destroy my life. And they stop on their own. They go to AA. They don't even have a treatment program. They just, through straight willpower, stop. All right? Because they don't want to lose everything. But then you have the third kind, which is the hopeless variety. That person will not stop. They get DUIs, they lose the family, they lose the kids, they lose the wife, they lose the job, they go to jail, they're on probation, they will not stop. I mean, their life just continues to get worse and worse and worse and worse. They won't stop. All right? The reason that this person cannot stop is because they actually get to a point where they have a disease. All right? A dis-ease. All right? Dis-ease. They're unable to drink or use with ease anymore. They can't do it. Now, this is a place where a lot of people struggle, especially those who are addicts and alcoholics, because they don't believe it's actually a disease. All right? Now, it starts out, in my opinion, it starts out as a choice. You do have a choice in the beginning. You have a choice to use. You have a choice to drink. You have a choice to not take suggestions. You have a choice to continue doing all these things that you're doing because you're trying to treat something that's going on. But what happens is eventually you trigger the illness. You trigger the disease. It's no different than if you eat cupcakes and candy and Coca-Colas and that's all you eat for 15 years, and then you trigger diabetes, or you trigger heart disease, or you trigger some type of illness that you now have to have medicine for, you have to go to the doctor for because of your poor choices and your willful decisions. Okay? So because for years we've done what we wanted to, we've now triggered this disease, which is addiction. That's not going to go untreated. And it's not going away. And it's only going to get worse. If you got it, you got it. All right? Other than a direct zap from God, it ain't going nowhere. Now that does happen, but it's very, very rare. All right? So if you got it, you have to learn what's going on with you. You have to learn to treat it. The good news is it can be treated. That's the good news. All right? But you have to learn how to treat it. And then you got to be desperate enough to do it. All right? So let's talk about this hopeless variety. Now, how do you know if you're an addict? The only person that can diagnose you is you. All right? The big book tells us that we can diagnose ourselves. It says, do you have trouble with personal relationships? Can you not keep a job? Can you not do the things that normal people can do? Does your life become unmanageable? Are you unable to use and control how much you use? When you use, do you not know when you're going to stop? All right. I like to say, if you had $1 million in your bank account right now, what would happen to you? You'd die. All right. If I gave you $1 million right now, how long would you live? Not long. If that's the case, you're probably a hopeless addict. All right. So we know that in step 1, we admit we're powerless. All right? This is where we diagnose the problem. Step 2, it says we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. All right? This is where we diagnose the solution. In step 3, it says we make a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood it. This is about a decision to seek the solution. Up until this point, we do nothing but think. All right, all these are done in our mind. You have to be the one to come to the point where you know you're powerless. You have to come to the belief that something greater than you, God, can help you. And then you have to make a decision to do something about it. It's actually to seek the solution through action. Now, most people only get that far. They never take any action. Step 4 through 9 are the action steps that bring us into the solution through a spiritual awakening, which is simply a perception change. You have to get to the place where you see things differently. All right? You have to get there. If you don't get to the place where you see things differently, then you're not connected to the power source, which is the solution. All right? So if the problem is we're powerless and our lives have become unmanageable, then the solution is we need power. But how do we get it? How do we get this power? What we have to do is we have to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. So what is our will and our lives? Our will is our thinking. And our lives are our actions. We have to get to the point where we can turn our thinking over to God. Because if we don't turn our thinking over, our actions will certainly never be turned over. If you want your life to change, your actions have to change. But if your actions are going to change, your thinking has to change. So how do you turn your thinking over to the care of God? You have to learn what thinking is healthy and what thinking isn't healthy. All right? So you have to find out, where's the sick thinking at? In step 4, we find out that resentment, fears, and harms are blocking us from God or his power. I like to say from God's power. All right? All of those are attached to thinking patterns. All right? So a lot of times we think that what we're doing is blocking us from God, but the truth is what we're thinking is blocking us from God. Because if you are a believer in Jesus Christ, which I assume all of us are, then you're already connected to God. Everything's been done. Now what we have to do is learn how to receive it. But the problem is we don't know how to receive it because our thinking is blocking us. All right? So we have to learn how to get this thinking out of the way. Resentment is called the number one offender. We cannot hold on to resentments. Can't do it. What is a resentment? It's to re-feel a feeling over and over. It's to replay something over and over. It's torture. Something happened to you, somebody did something to you, and you just continuously re-feel it over and over and over and over. If you're going to get clean, if you're going to get sober, you have got to learn how to get rid of that thing. All right? So how do we do that? First, we have to find out, where is our part in the resentment? Do we have anywhere in this thing that's ours? If we do, all right, so we find out, where's our part? Most often, what has happened is we have responded out of fear. We've responded out of selfishness. We've responded out of self-centeredness to other people's actions. We've done things that have hurt other people. They've lashed out back at us, and now we're mad at them, which is the resentment. So most often what you will find, if you look deep enough, is you're the reason someone did something back to you, and now you're mad at them for doing something back to you. So it's like this revolving thing that happens. If you can find your part, you can get free. Finding our part, this is what frees us from resentment. If you can't find your part, that's where you have to stop. If all you can do is see what they've done wrong, you'll never move forward. All right? So the only thing that you have to do with the resentment is really find out what's your part in it and see it. You have to truly see it. This is why a sponsor is important, because they help us see things that we can't see. Self can't see self. So they come in and they show us our blind spots. When we truly see this, it frees us. Now, what happens, very, very few resentments do we have that once we see our part, we don't get free of them. So I would say 90% of the time, if you can find your part in it, you'll get free. The other 10%, what you have to do is you got to pray it away. How do you pray a resentment away? Anybody know? All right. Does nobody really know, or does anybody just not want to answer? Because, okay, that's fine. Because this is the thing. If y'all don't know this, then that means you've probably got some resentments that you can't get rid of.
Would you just ask God to help you forgive that person?
No. Remember, you're trying to see your part. Close, but no. What we do is we pray for that person. We pray for them. Everything you want for... Now, this is the thing. You can't see your part. So how can you forgive them? Remember, you're trying to get a revelation. You're trying to see what's your part in this. If you cannot see it, there's nothing you can do about it. Or maybe you do see it, but you can't let go for some reason. What you do is you begin to pray for that person. Everything you want for yourself, you pray it over them. It doesn't matter if you feel like it or not. Every single thing you want for yourself. Peace, joy, blessings, forgiveness. Like all the good things that you want in life, pray it over them. And what will happen is eventually you will be able to release that person. Resentment is about unforgiveness. All right? Unforgiveness is wanting to see someone get what you think they deserve. Wanting them to be corrected. Wanting them to be righted. Wanting them to be punished. Yeah.
So if you're holding this resentment towards somebody, and this is honestly like, you said...
Don't call their name because we're recording, but go ahead.
No, I'm not calling
Okay.
So you start praying for this person, all the things you want. You already resent them, then what you pray for them, they start getting all these things. Wouldn't you resent them even more?
Well, that's the beauty of it. See, when we begin to pray for a person, we bring God into the situation. And one of two things will happen. Either God will change that person, or he'll change how we see them. I'm telling you, man, it works. Just start praying for them. There's something about it, man, when we bring God into the situation. See, we're an emotional being. We're emotional. We're made up of all these emotions. God can reach down and touch you in one instant and change how you see something. He can change how you feel about a person in one instance. See, that's why it's important for us to see our part. Because if we can see our part, we realize we can't blame them. Because most of the time what happens when we see our part, we see that we caused them to lash out back at us. And that's why we're resentful. It all started with us.
What if it necessarily didn't start with you? What if the person did something, obviously, and you responded out in a way that wasn't healthy for that particular relationship, and it just made it that much worse?
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So, I mean, it can go both ways. Either A, you directly caused it, or you were part of indirectly the result.
Right. This is the thing. 95% of the time, if we're resentful at someone, we did something to hurt them. Almost always. Now, there are certain few times, like we work with a lot of women in recovery, they are molested as a child. They're raped as a child. Now, what is their part in that? There is no part in that. Okay? Their only part in that is simply holding on to the resentment and not choosing to let go of it. All right? In that position, you're not going to have any part in it, but holding on, refusing to forgive. That may be your only part in it. See, if you refuse to forgive someone, then you're now putting them in a position where you don't want to be either. You see what I'm saying? Like, we all want forgiveness. Every one of us wants forgiveness for what we've done. Like, anybody, I mean, have you hurt people in your active addiction?
Yes.
But yet, once you quit, what do you want? forgiveness. But if we're not willing to give that, how are we expecting to get it ourselves? So anyway, sometimes our only part is not letting it go. And sometimes that's where we find ourselves where we have to pray for them. Everything that we want for ourselves, we pray for them. And then God softens our heart. All right, so these three things, resentments, fears, and harms, these are what's blocking us from God's power. So we have to get rid of them. We have to deal with them. All right, now, let's talk about resentments, fears, and harms. Now, you got to understand something, man. If any of you are resentful at any person, place, thing, institution, idea, philosophy, whatever it is, you have to understand who it's harming. It's harming us. So here's my little picture that I like to draw. Now remember, our problem with addiction is lack of power. All right, so here we are needing God's power in order to get sober. This is what we look like. Resentments, fears, and harms are blocking us. Now, resentment is about unforgiveness. If we refuse to forgive, it's blocking me from God's power. Now, remember the three-part illness of addiction is the allergy, the obsession, and the spiritual malady. All right, this is the only one that can be treated. You cannot treat these two. All right, these are symptoms. These are symptoms of the problem, but these cause the most destruction. So we look thinking, man, I got to treat these two, but you can't treat these. The only one that you can treat is where the real problem lies. And the spiritual malady, that's what it looks like. This is what active addiction looks like. You're spiritually sick, you refuse to forgive, you're full of fear, and so you hurt people. So what we have to do is, we got to understand resentment's about unforgiveness, so we got to fear. We got to forgive. Fear is about not trusting God. So what do we got to do? We got to learn to trust God. Because let me tell you what will happen if you get in fear. If you get in fear, you will start being blocked, and then you'll get resentful at people. You'll get resentful at the people that are causing you to be afraid. Or you'll get resentful at yourself because you are afraid. And then what happens when you get resentful and you get fearful? You cause harms. All right? And when we hurt people, we have shame and guilt. So the answer is learn to forgive. When we do that, resentment leaves. Whoever that person is, whatever they did to us, it doesn't matter what it is. We have to forgive. When we do that, God's power flows down where that resentment was blocking, and self-will is covered. It's pushed out. It's done away with. Then if we learn to trust God, look, sometimes you said, what if I start praying for the things that they want and they get them? I don't want that. I don't want them to get blessed. So we're fearful, but instead we choose to trust God. We choose to trust God because that deals with the fear, and we begin to pray for them, and God begins to change us. That fear gets out of the way. Then we're able to forgive ourselves. We're able to release ourselves from the harms that we've caused. And guess what? Where self was directing the show, now God's power is flowing in. This is the goal. This is sobriety right here, guys. This is what sobriety looks like. The spiritual malady goes away because we've dealt with our resentments, our fears, and our harms. They're not directing us anymore. When the spiritual malady goes away, we quit obsessing over using. And when we quit obsessing, we never put the thing we're allergic to in. And we're sober. All right, now, let's talk about where the desire to use comes from.